Welcome to the Walk Around Podcast, where our goal always is to share with you the insights, the skills, the processes, and the leaders that are influencing the retail automotive landscape today. I'm one of your hosts, Nick Funch, and as always, joined by Danny. What's up, Danny?
Good to see you, Nick.
I'm excited about our guest today.
Oh, yeah, it's a good one.
Yeah, for sure. Joining us today is Bob Lanham, who is head of automotive retail at Facebook. He is responsible for dealer groups, top resellers in the U.S., works with franchise dealers and manufacturers as well, partners with DMS providers, CRM, equity mining tools, and digital retailing platforms. Prior to Facebook, he was sales director at Hulu. Prior to Hulu, spent 4 years at Yahoo and 3 at Microsoft. But prior to that, and this is where my favorite, started his automotive career selling cars. As a sales representative at Toyota store in the Southeast, worked his way up, internet sales manager, F&I manager. He's a graduate of Elon University, husband and father to 3 children. Let's take a walk around with Bob. Welcome, Bob.
Guys, it's awesome to be here. I appreciate it.
Well, we're glad to have you. I'm always curious, how did you get into retail automotive? Just hit the high notes, and what was it like kind of understanding your pay plan all of a sudden was on commission?
Yeah, full commission, right?
Yeah,
I actually had a negative paycheck once because the deal got changed. But yeah, full disclosure, I dated a great girl in college whose family owned a number of stores. Upon graduation, they welcomed me to one of their stores, and not realizing or understanding the business at all, I couldn't have been luckier that it was a Southeast Toyota store down in Florida. So. You mentioned internet manager. I had a gateway laptop that I
Do
had.
they still make those?
I think they're gone, but I had to go in at a certain time because I didn't have an office or a cube, and whose office the phone jack was in. I had to wait when she was not in the office that I could go in, plug in the phone jack, download the leads, update my Cobalt site. And then, kind of go from there. So this was the early days. It was a lot of fun.
Well, I was a little concerned you were going to talk about index cards and keeping all your customers on index cards, but I think that predates even the phone jack. But did you wear a tie? Did they take the scissors and cut your tie on your first commission, or
definitely had my tie cut? But we were a Florida store, right? It got warm. We definitely wore ties in the winter. Come summer, we were full on, uniformed polo because it was hot, especially when you had to go find that car that was buried deep in the lot. By the time you brought it up for your customers, you needed to wipe off a little bit. But yes, had my tie cut on my first sale. Yeah,
it's always fun to think about. And I'm sure winter in Florida, you didn't have to wear that tie very long. So, but, I guess I'm super curious. We're coming off probably the most disruptive and accelerated kind of time in retail automotive. What's your thoughts? What are you doing? How's Facebook positioning? I mean, just give me your thoughts about some trends you're seeing in automotive retail as a whole.
Yeah, I'll get to the Facebook part last because I'll just tell you what I learned. And this is going to sound corny, that I'm really proud of the industry. It's unfortunate it took a pandemic for us to evolve and maybe accelerate some of the offerings and strategies and processes. But nonetheless, I think we're there and still getting better. But, outside of digital retailing, which I know has been talked about for a great deal, I'll bring it to the advertising and marketing side of the business, which is what I live in. And the number one thing that I learned was that when the pandemic hit, right, the general managers and the dealers' principals went back to what they were taught at GM Academy, which was you have to monitor the top 3 expenses. Right. And we all know what those top 3 expenses. The first one is people, payroll, probably for every business in the world. Yeah. But what a lot of people don't realize, if you're not in the business or even in retail, that advertising and marketing tends to be a dealer's second largest expenditure, followed by their floor plan. And maybe floor plan's number 2 based on how they purchase their cars. But advertising and marketing is a top expense. And when you watched what dealers did during the pandemic, right, cutting advertising and marketing was first, before they furloughed or cut people. Kudos to them, by the way. And that just goes to show the greatness that we have in auto retail. So the biggest thing as I learned is that when times got unprecedented and they had to evaluate these expenses, even at the highest level, your dealer principal and your GM realized they needed to learn media. They needed to understand everything they were buying, the return on investment, how much they buy of it, because you'd be surprised. Not many dealer principals or GMs know what they buy advertising and marketing. They say, I have someone over there that does it. But if you ask them if they know their payroll expense and their floor plan costs, they can ring them right off.
Why, can we stay there for a second, Bob? Like, why is that? I mean, is it because there's agencies that kind of take that work? Or, I mean, what, from your perspective, why is that they don't necessarily have their finger on the pulse of what that expense, or more importantly, how it functions in their store?
I think it's just the nature of the history of the business, I guess, where the dealer principal is focused on the 4 or 5 different profit centers in the retail business, right? With sales being the overarching one. Mm-hmm. And then the general manager really focused on the sales side. Yes, I'm well aware they oversee service, but with the right service manager or director, that runs it, can run itself. I just think historically, it wasn't an issue. We didn't really need to look at it. We just trusted what was being sold to us and what we bought. But when sales halted or were cut by 70+%, right, you were forced to evaluate. And I really hope I've run into very few dealers, and there are dealer principals out there that know where every advertising and marketing dollar goes. I'm not here to say there aren't any, because there are, but the majority do not, especially at the GM. And I just think it was something that they just assumed was taken care of by another department.
Yeah. Wow.
Yeah, it's something that kind of either fell to the wayside, or maybe there wasn't as much exposure. And once you get into that world, looking at digital ads, attribution, where is your money going? Where are people coming from when they hit your site, or when they buy a car? That could be a slippery slope. That's a tough place to navigate on your own.
Well, there's a clear difference between selling and marketing. They're two very different professions, right? And you have to understand the nuances of each. But most general managers or GSM, general sales managers, where do they come from? They come from the sales floor, right? They just moved themselves up. So their mentality is sales. How many leads can I buy, right? Or what impression program is there that gives me a low cost per click, but leads? Right. And that's easy to do in many cases. But what has happened as the industry has evolved, or media has evolved, and form leads are declining, right? And different measure, they've realized the media education has never been there. And that is actually one of my passion projects outside of Facebook, is to help the industry understand what media mix modeling is. They call it MMM, media mix modeling. And all that is understanding everything you're buying by line item, how much you're buying it, and then how are your sales, right? I bought all of this. Here are my sales for the month. There's your model after you map it all out. Mm-hmm. Then you can tweak accordingly to make the model more efficient. But you guys, you'd be surprised how many dealers don't even have their expenditures for advertising and marketing listed out.
Just one lump sum.
Or not. And also remember, in our world, a lot of that stuff gets buried in the part statement.
Yeah. And
then they just see part statement line item. They don't even see what's buried under there. I've done hundreds of 20 groups, hundreds of them, and my team the same. And one of the best exercises I get to sit in on, because I get to sit in most of the day now that I know all the moderators and whatnot, is when they go through their expenses line item by line item and they get to the part statement, right? And they start to itemize their part statement. And I'll see a GM literally call up, hey, what is, and then they'll name it off in the back. We've been paying for it for 3 months. It's $1,000. And next thing you know, it's fun. It's fun to watch.
So what are, so I'm going to put myself in a kind of a GM shoes that maybe has came up through the sales floor, what do I need to know? What do I need to be looking for? What are some simple steps I can be taking today to at least help me in my awareness of kind of the 3M modeling that you were referencing?
First and foremost, and this should be an easy exercise.
Okay.
This should be an easy exercise.
Bob, I like easy, so this is good. Yeah.
But I know it's not, because I've done this with GMs and dealer principals outside of my day job. First and foremost, you have to outline all of your advertising and marketing expenses. You just need to list it out.
Okay.
Right? I buy this, I buy this, I buy this, I buy this, I buy this. And you've got to list out the cost of how much you're buying. Then more importantly, if there's any details of what you're buying, like it can't be package A. Right. It has to be package A, and then what's included in package A. Just at the very least, map it all out. Then you're going to go, holy cow, I had no idea. Right? Especially if you turn it into a nice little pie chart, which is a click of a button in Excel. Right? You start to see the percentages of what you're buying, and you're like, wow. That's the first thing. I don't expect general managers or dealer principals to know media. I really don't. Yeah. But I do expect them to, at the very least, be able to outline it, right? And map it all out. And that's the first step they should do. Then after that, they should start asking questions. Why are we spending a lot on this? Or what is our return on that? Right? The easiest return is my cost to sales. All right, that's easy. You got that. But if you want to improve your a lot of dealers will say, I want to make sure my marketing and advertising expense is not an expense, it's an investment, which truly, as corny as it sounds, it should be, right? You're investing in sales, but everyone looks at it as an expense. But after you map it out, what's my return? What am I getting for that, right? And I'll close with this as it relates to that. And it's the last step in this. You cannot look at what you buy in a silo. You can't say, okay, I've got a search partner or person that does that. I've got a social person. I've got an OTT person. I've got a radio. Right? You can have different people execute that. But at the end of the day, as the business owner or the manager of the business, you have to look at it holistically, because media platforms do not work in a silo. They actually work together. That's why everyone who runs a TV ad goes to search to see if there was a lift, because we know TV drives search. We know Facebook drives search. We know radio might drive search. But what happens? Well, we just look at search. Oh, well, look what search drove. Well, it didn't really just drive that. Look what everything else you bought, and vice versa.
So I just want to make sure I understand this. So you're like, it's listing out, but then looking at the total and understanding kind of what that total is, and it could be eye-opening, it could not be eye-opening, but so that's kind of the third step, is looking at the holistic total. Is that what you're saying? Looking at it,
exactly. Looking at it holistically on your spend to sales. And then what you'll say is, okay, how do we make this better so I'm not spending as much? Because listen, we've been challenging dealers for 3+ years, the team, that we believe, and we've proved this out with many dealers, that we believe that the average dealer could cut anywhere between 30 and 50% of their advertising and marketing spend, still sell the same amount or
that's
more.
A big number though, right, Bob? Because when you're saying it's the second highest expense in a dealership and I can cut it by a third to a half, that's significant, right?
It's salaries for a whole year and just in 1 month. And we have a number of case studies, and we've got some partners that are really strong at this. And this, without selling any platform or going against a platform, just think of it this way. You map it out and you say, wow, I spend a lot on this platform. But if there's another media platform that can say, hey, I can do exactly what this platform, or maybe even two platforms combined, but I can do it for a third of the cost and give you the same return, if not higher, would you be interested? Well, of course I'm interested. Boom, next thing you know, you bring in that vendor, you've removed to maybe more expensive vendor, and you just cut your cost and you're selling the same amount. That's media mix modeling, understanding everything you're buying, what role each one has, and then what the impact is on sales. And I'll end my conversation on this point. I had a dealer call me up. I get this all the time. hey, Bob, this vendor just called me and it was a phenomenal sales pitch. Sounds fantastic. What do you know about them? And I'll say, okay, well, what are they selling you? Are they selling you something that's going to be incremental to your existing business? Or are they selling you something that is going to come in and replace something that's in your business? Maybe replace at a 1-to-1, maybe replace at a lower. Like, what are you looking for? Well, I don't know. It was a really good sales pitch. Well, hold on. You've got your expense already. So again, are they coming in and saying that they can drive more sales? Because if that's the case, you would add them to the mix, which includes the cost, and then you would see what your incremental sales are from that. Mm-hmm. But if they're coming in to replace maybe another vendor or two, right? Because you already know what your proper amount of expenditure should be. But here's the best part. The model will tell you what is working and what is not working.
So it's a great kind of question to ask, outside of advertising, outside of anything, but hey, I have this person sitting across the table selling me something. Are we talking about incremental gains or replacement gains? And I think it helps you kind of that fork in the road, make a better buying decision at the end of the day, you know?
Well, let's look at the OEMs. Let's look at, the regional businesses in auto. They have agencies that do this for them, right? They don't just go and buy the latest and greatest that come in. It comes in and there's a conversation in how it fits the current model. Now, dealers are independent businesses, right? Again, mm-hmm. who rose from sales, who are just measured on that 30-day cycle, right? They've never been taught, or no one is selling them to understanding of media mix modeling. Because I'm vendor A, I'm just going to go in with a great sales pitch, and then I just won the deal, and I'm going to walk out. Could care less what happens with the business at all they bought from me. So I would love to just bring the knowledge that we do at a national or a regional level and bring it to a local level, because we know in the auto retail space, they spend a great deal of mm-hmm. money in advertising and marketing on a monthly basis. And like you said earlier, it's a lot of money. We have a case study with a store actually up here in Michigan. They were able to cut 86% of their advertising and marketing spend. They went from number 8 in the group of profitability to number 2, and they grew in sales. Now, that example is they were overspending to begin with.
Okay.
They just clearly were overspending. The average we see is that 25% I could cut, maintain my current sales, or grow.
So on paper, that sounds amazing, right? When you talk about look at the budget, outline, if you looked at it for the year, 100% of your marketing budget, and you outline that to where is that allocated from a spend perspective in the different channels. And then you can identify, okay, where are things, adding together to create lift when it comes to leads, when it comes to sales, and the technology's there and that attribution is there. Something you mentioned though, that I want to double click on for a second, that I think is an interesting part of the story. You mentioned it's not, we want to outline how those numbers play out, right? We want to look at the marketing mix, but you want to understand the role that different kinds of ads have and the different kinds of channels and what that means. And I'm curious to just hear a little bit more from you about what that means and what dealers should be thinking about when it comes to the role that these different channels and different kinds of ads have in their marketing mix.
Yeah, and measurement plays the biggest role in understanding the success of that, right? So we're all familiar with last click attribution, right? Giving all the credit to that last ad that was clicked on. And that's the easiest sell. And I will be honest with you, because I have presented in front of thousands of Toyota dealers, right? And I've said, listen, if you truly believe last click attribution is the right measurement, then buy 100% of your overall advertising marketing budget on search, because there's plenty enough of it to buy. I'm being dead serious. There's plenty of it enough to buy. But we all know search captures intent, where other media platforms create the intent. But you might not always see that creation, especially in a click, right? So we're able to see, it's called path to conversion. What was my path to conversion? A conversion can be an online metric, or it could be an offline metric like a sale. What was my path? When you start to map that out, you start to see what role different properties play in that path. And then when you overlay the cost, that's when you go, holy cow, like I didn't realize they played a bigger role than maybe I'm buying, or they are very expensive compared to the role that they actually play in the path to conversion. There's this old 80-20 rule in the internet that only 20% of the internet, people on the internet actually click ads.
Yeah.
Right? Which is still high volume, but only. Well, if we're measuring on clicks and we're optimizing, we're using these very sophisticated optimization engines that Facebook has and Google has and Amazon has to optimize the clicks. Here's what we're actually doing. We're optimizing away from the majority of people who buy cars, and we're simply optimizing to the minority of people who click and buy cars. We're a discovery platform at Facebook and Instagram, right? We have 231 million people on our platform every month, 178 million a day. These are adults 18 plus. We're going to deliver ads to your customers or potential customers. It doesn't necessarily mean they're going to click, because our ad might actually create an intent for them to search for it at a later date. Or maybe they saw our ad was on a third-party website, saw the other, click there. Well, does that third-party site get the credit? Or do we get the credit? Maybe it's 50-50. Maybe it's 70-30. That's why, again, you go up at the national level, regional level, they measure this. We just don't do it at the local level.
Yeah, it's interesting. And just going back maybe to your case study a little bit, Bob, I'm curious. So obviously that's a fantastic example, 86% savings. But it seems to me like the making a list and kind of your modeling method, just worst case scenario, you're going to identify if you're overspending somewhere. Is that a fair statement?
Worst case scenario, you're just going to know exactly where every dollar goes in your second largest expense.
Yeah.
I mean, worst case scenario, you're literally going to be like, oh, I now know what I buy. And I know how many cars I sold, and I know how much money I made. Okay. There's at the very least, I know what my initial model is.
Right.
You'd be surprised after that initial model. I did this for a dealer a couple of years ago. He asked me if I would just do it on the side. I'm like, I'm not really doing anything except you're going to send me your expenditures. I'm just going to put it in a spreadsheet and send it back.
Yeah. It's like creating a budget.
That's all I did. But when I sent the pie chart back, which was literally a copy drag, click the pie chart button on it, they were floored.
Yeah.
They don't pick. Why? Because, I mean, you expectantly GMs and dealer principals come in, and then all of a sudden they got 16 other issues they have to focus on, right? And that's why, and so you all are familiar with this new app called Clubhouse, right? That has sort of taken over the industry, and among other, there has been a number of rooms that has talked about, should a dealer have someone within the store that oversees the advertising and marketing? They don't have to execute it. They don't have to do it themselves. They have to, at the very least, oversee it, and that's their sole job.
So when we talk about, this model now, and I love what you said, like what's the worst case scenario is now you know where you're spending your money and where it's all going, right? But in a best case scenario, there's the next step is action, right? You're going to take action to that. So when you have that spreadsheet and you have kind of that pie chart and you see what that looks like, what is your advice to dealers? Is it looking at specific metrics? Is it kind of changing from a messaging strategy? I guess there's so much there in that pool. How do you kind of begin prioritizing?
There's so much there. And listen, there's a quote from a statistician that has not been on earth for 100 plus years, but it's a great quote. It says, all models are wrong, some are useful. Right? Like every dealer is going to have a different model. It could be a same branded store in the same market, and they might have a different model and both be successful. But you have to at least identify what your model is. So the biggest thing that we always see right off the bat is after they map it out and they see the percent being spent for a specific initiative or maybe even a specific platform. And then they say, well, how many did we sell off that platform? Well, I don't know. Well, what do you mean you don't know? Like, well, I'll make it up, 45% of my budget on this. How many cars did we sell? Well, we got X amount of leads and we had a 5%. That's actually not the way you're supposed to do the math, right? But unfortunately, it's the only way we know to do the math. We're still stuck on this. Well, a 5% close rate on a lead form is fantastic. If you get it to 6, holy cow, even better. But you spent 45% of your budget to get to that close rate. Like, that's not what's actually good. We need to back into, you should be spending 7% of your budget for that 5% close rate or 5%. So I think the action items is to start asking questions to your vendors. What role do you play? What role do you play in creating intent and then driving intent? How are you measured, right? You can't measure your billboard buy, which no one can say that's not a bad buy if you're on the best interstate or location and every day someone drives by your billboard, because you're creating recall, you're creating brand awareness. So when that person comes in market, hopefully you're the first. What's the value of that? Some dealers are going to say zero value in brand advertising. I could care less about advertising, why someone should buy from me. I'm just going to hammer them on price. Okay. But there are many dealers that say it's actually brand first before anything else. Because listen, I sold Toyotas. We butted up next to a Honda store. Guess what was not our competitor? That Honda store. Could have cared less. It was the two Toyota stores on the same street, 6 miles that way and 8 miles that way. And what was our differentiator? Because they had the exact same vehicles that we had. It's the experience of the store. And that's another learning we're seeing, is that dealers will first, after they accidentally learn that when you push someone into a digital retailing flow, you can make 2 extra profit, right? Because you put the buyer in control. And when they're in control, we all know we'll pay a premium if we just feel comfortable and in control. But secondly, to answer your question, they're starting to understand different strategies that might actually be making the bid. Right? Well, I bought X number of leads, but I only closed at 5%. Yeah, but did you realize your branding strategy drove so much incrementality on clicks and views and this and that, and you actually had an increase in sales? At the end of the day, we got to get the sales.
Yeah. Bob, this is fascinating. I really love kind of your media mix modeling and kind of your 3-step process. And I'm going to give Danny the tough question here. But Danny, as you kind of reflect on this conversation with Bob, what's your biggest takeaway?
Yeah, I mean, this has been great. I could talk for like 7 more hours about this. So
part 2, we got to have Bob back.
We got to have
anytime, guys. I love this, as you can tell.
We got to do it when the leaf blower is not right outside the window.
Yeah. I mean,
I don't know if you heard that. I don't know if you heard that, but man.
At least, the parking lot looks clean. Anyway, so talking about the takeaway, I think if you are a dealer and you don't have some kind of visibility and there's questions in your mind, where is this? Who's managing this? If no one's managing it, how do we get started? That to me is like the biggest thing I think that I took from this conversation, is just asking these questions. And these questions will get you, if there's no answers, well, then there you go. You know that your answer is, well, we need to start putting this together. If you come to some kind of conclusion, you see that maybe you have something like this in mind, continue to ask questions, continue to dig in and see, hopefully there's incremental gains like Bob talked about for all dealers out there, where they can go and look at the mix and see how they spend their money wisely. We talk about the second biggest expense in the dealership. I mean, boy, wouldn't anyone like to bring that down, but keep the sales up? What about you, Nick?
Yeah, I think same thing. I think just understanding, putting a highlighter or something on your expenses, kind of line by line, and then looking at the holistic number, I think helps drive that. Bob, I know you're on LinkedIn. Everyone can find you on LinkedIn. You also mentioned Clubhouse. I'm curious, what's your kind of engagement like with Clubhouse? Just reaction there. You're on there, I'm assuming.
I'm on there. I'm intrigued. I do love the open forum, or the ability to have an open forum. Where I'm interested to see where it goes is when we have these type of platforms, people love to just talk about themselves, their successes, all of the above. And a lot of times it can be the same people. So how do we engage more people? Here's what I equate it to. I always talk to these dealers. I'm having the best quarter. I'm having the best month. I'm having the best. I'm like, okay, well, there aren't more cars being sold, right? In fact, there's less cars being sold. So if you're having the best month and they're having the best month, I want to know the dealers who aren't having the best, why. Like, I honestly want, what has happened to their store to make your store? Because market share is being shifted somehow, somewhere. So I'm anxious, but of course, people aren't going to join and be like, guys, let me tell you how bad I am at a dealer, man. You guys are killing and I lost, man. I lost 100 grand.
You took my sales.
So I think it's been great for people to maybe talk about successes, as well as people to just listen. Yeah. Right. And be able to take away what they want. And I just try to add value when I can. I don't try to take over rooms. I haven't really created a room. I use it for feedback. Right. So when I hear people talking about Facebook and Instagram and messaging and WhatsApp, et cetera, I honestly write notes. I mean, if it can help us make our product better, I truly will do what I need to do to make a product better. And I do want to say this, there's two things to think about that two people said. So I want to make sure they give credit. And I thought it was fantastic. So Alex Vetter, we all know who Alex Vetter is, the founder and CEO of Cars.com, was on CPT News late last year. And I'm watching it. And he says, your advertising and marketing spend is not meant to be a tax. We don't want to tax our investment, right, to drive sales. And he was just talking about the purpose of understanding how some platforms might be a tax versus others. So maybe that's a mindset to think about as dealers are preparing their advertising and marketing spend. And the second one was from Jeremy Anspash, the founder and CEO of Pure Cars, which is an agency in the dealer space. And he said something really interesting, which is unfortunate, but very real in our business, which is, he said, when you take away the bias of how you buy media, right? When you look at what you want to buy neutrally, and you're not biased because maybe they're a friend, or maybe they took you out, or whatever the scenario is, and you start to look at what should and shouldn't be bought, your media mix becomes a lot more powerful. So two things just to kind of think about that I took away from last year was like spot on.
Yeah, it's
so
great.
Good.
So
one of the things I think about a lot is kind of that, and it reminded me of that last quote there around the bias, is kind of the more you can make your business decisions transactional versus emotional, the chances are you're going to get a better outcome. This is great. Yeah, go ahead.
I didn't mean to cut you off. Just, I know we want to.
Yeah, you're good.
But what is, this is what dealers need to ask their vendors. I noticed you sell 3 products, but you're really pushing one of them. Why are you pushing this one over the other 2? And let them talk about, do they understand how the 3 products that they're selling actually work together or not work together? Why are they selling one of their products over another? Is there bias there? I don't know, but these are questions dealers should be asking versus just taking a word for it and then seeing what happens after that.
Yeah, and you can apply the same principles, right? Is what outcomes am I trying to drive through any product I'm offering or any vendor I'm engaged with? And does the product, did I just take kind of the everything package, or is what I'm doing align with my strategic priorities to achieve those outcomes? So, Bob, we're going to have you back. But if you liked Bob's conversation today, make sure to download, subscribe to the Walk Around Podcast, hit the like button, email it to your friends. And don't forget to shoot Danny and I a note about other guests or other topics you might like to hear about. You can find Bob on LinkedIn and Clubhouse. Danny and I are on there as well. And Bob, we're going to have you back soon, but thank you for joining us today, and we'll talk soon.
Anytime. Thank you, guys.